Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat, and with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me, or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
And the Lord said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens, to distinguish between the day and the night. And let them be for signs and for festival times, and for the numbering by them the account of days, and for the sanctifying of the beginnings of the months, and the beginnings of years, the passing away of months and the passing away of years, the revolutions of the sun, the birth of the moon, and the revolvings of the seasons. And let them be for luminaries in the expanse of the heavens, to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And the Lord made two great luminaries, and they were equal in glory, 21 years, less 602 and 70 parts of an hour. And afterwards the moon recited against the sun a false report, and she was diminished. And the sun was appointed to be the greater light, to rule the day, and the moon to be the inferior light, to rule in the night, and the stars. And the Lord ordained them unto their offices in the expanse of the heavens, to give forth light upon the earth, and to minister by day and by night, to distinguish between the light of the day and the darkness of the night. And the Lord beheld that it was good, and it was evening, and it was morning, day the fourth. That's the Targum, Genesis. Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen, and I'm honored and glad to be here in fellowship with all of you. I know many of you have been looking forward to this show, as I have promised to do a follow-up on the two-part series that I did with David Carrico and John Pounders on the ancient Hebrew Enochian calendar. And tonight on this show, I'm going to explain how it is that I came to the calculations that I did in making that particular calendar, as well as how you, in looking at and examining it, because I know many of you have purchased it, um, how you can utilize it to keep up with the Kadesh, which Kadesh is the Hebrew word for the time of the new moon, and how you can use such determination for maintaining adherence to the following four sabbatical weeks and the Sabbaths on the seventh day of these four sabbatical weeks. And so I'll be explaining all of that this evening, as well as how it is only by this particular calendar system that one can maintain observance of Sabbath in the correct manner that it was adhered to us and that was given to the Israelites themselves to um, maintain alignment. And also, that is only with this calendar system that one can determine the exact days that the Levitical feast days, as laid out to us in chapter 23, can also be determined and adhered to. And so we're going to be speaking about this evening. For those that don't know, today is the 8th of February 2016 on the Julian Gregorian solar calendar. But on the ancient Hebrew lunar calendar, it is the 12th day of the month of Shavat, which is the 11th month of the year 6003. And I'll be explaining also how I came to determine the year when the Hebrews recognized the year as being 5,777. And also, if you have any questions and you'd like to send them to me or ask them, I'll be glad to, you know, be glad to answer and to share your concerns with everybody else on the show. But before we get to the year, let me pull up the link for the lunar calendar with percentages. That's all you have to look up. And you'll find that there are several, but, and I look at all of them when determining, and some of them are slightly different. But the one that I use to determine the fractional percentages of the moon is the United States Navy, and it's military data for the moon fraction. And I'll share this with you in the chat room for those that have access. And if not, you can just look up its fraction of the moon illuminated, and it's usno.navy.mil. And you'll be able to, on that page, you can select pulling out the lunar calendar with the fraction, and it gives you two different options. You can select it for determination at midnight, which, even though we recognize that as the beginning of the day, um, it is not the beginning of the day according to the ancient Hebrew calendar. The beginning of the day actually begins with dawn. And as Christ said, there are 12 hours of day and then, 12 hours of night, and that comprise a full day. But anyways, I click on the noon to pull up um, the fractions of the moon as they are aligned to noontime, because it will be in the evening that we actually see and are able to observe the moon in its glory and the percentages. And so it's better to calculate from noon rather than midnight so that you can be as precise as possible. And it also gives you the option to set the time zone for where you are in world. And because I am in Athens, Georgia, on the east coast of the United States of America, I use the Eastern Standard Time. And then you can also put in the year, 2017. You click the compute table, and then it will bring you the 12 every month and every day of the year, and it will calculate the percentages of the moon as it is waxing to full and also waning back to lunar conjunction. And it's in looking at these percentages that you can then determine when Kadesh occurs. Because Kadesh always follows the dark phase of moon when it is 0% full. And if you notice, like if you are looking at the calculations that I have pulled up, you'll notice that it is on the 26th of January that the moon is, or the 27th of January that the moon is 0% full, meaning that it is at lunar conjunction and it is completely dark and invisible to the observable eye. And then on the on the calendar that I created, you will recognize that it is on the 28th of January that I have determined Kadesh to occur. And that is for the month of Tibet. And so because the the 28th of January 2016 on the calendar, and those of you that have the calendar, if you will pull it out, you'll be able to follow along with what I'm saying and with how I'm explaining this. You will recognize that on the 27th of January, that is the 30th Tibet. That is the 10th month of the year 6003, and it is the lunar conjunction, the day of translation. And then the 28th of January on my calendar, it says the first day and new moon of Shavat. The year is 6003, the month 11. So that's the first day of the 11th month of the 6003rd year of the Hebrew calendar. And it also says Rosh Chodesh Shavat, which that is on a Saturday. And so for the following 4 7-day sabbatical weeks, because the calendar, the way God's calendar works, is you have the Rosh Chodesh, the first day and new moon, is excluded from the regular 7-day counts of the following 4 sabbatical weeks. And every lunar month is set up in the same way. You have new moon day, which is excluded, and then you have 4 7-day weeks, and then you will have either 29 or 30 days in the lunar month. And if you have 30 days, that last day is a translation day. It's called the translation day. And that will often be in between what is the 29th day, which is always the fourth Sabbath, the lunar conjunctive Sabbath, and Rosh Chodesh. And the reason it is set up this way on God's calendar is because the moon averages in cycle 29.531 days to go through its 4 lunar phases. And so it is just a little, it's slightly above an exact 29 and a half day, um, which if it were 29.5 days exactly, it would alternate exactly 29 days 1 month, 30 days the next, and back and forth, and vice versa. But because it averages 29.531 days, and I'm rounding up the fraction actually breaks out more. I think it's like 29.5307 something something something. So I'm rounding up to 0.531. But anyways, because it averages slightly above 29 and a half days, it will you will sometimes have two 30-day months back to back or two 29-day months back to back to term, all depending on how the phases of the moon unfold for that particular month. But again, if you look at the military calendar, the US Navy, the translation and the percentages of all of the days, the phases of the moon, you will see that it is on the 27th again of January and also on the 26th of February and the 27th of March that the moon reaches 0.00% for lunar conjunction. And so it is on the next day that, because these calculations are telling you what the percentages of the moon will be at noon, at midday, we know that when it turns to night 6 or 7 hours later, that the moon will progress past what is labeled infraction on this particular chart. And so, and I know this is complicated, especially if you're not looking at the chart that I'm looking at. But when I post this video and on the archive, I will put these links into the description box so you'll know exactly what to pull up so you can look at exactly what I am looking at to help you make this determination. And this is, the most difficult part of it. When I go into the explanation of how to utilize the calendar, it will be much more simple. But anyways, for those that are, want to understand how it is I determined what each of the dates on the Gregorian calendar, how I would label them according to their ancient Hebrew Enochian equivalent, this is how I did so. And so I'm going to explain really quick um, how you can determine, because again, you can calculate wherever you are on the plane of the earth according to time zone and set the calculations to be for noon so that when it turns evening, 6, 7 hours later, the moon will have progressed past the fraction that is cited on this particular chart. And so again, in January, on the 27th of January, the moon reaches 0.00% at noon, lunar conjunction. So we know it will be later that evening that it will start to become visible. Now, on the 28th of January at noon, it is 0.01% full, which means that it is barely a slight sliver. It is becoming what is called the young moon. And so 6 hours later, it will progress to somewhere near 0.02%, meaning that it has reached waxing crescent. It will be a thin sliver and reaching a waxing crescent, which when you look up the word for Kadesh in the Strongs, it comes from the verb Kadash, which means to renew or to become full. And so that's what the moon is doing on the 28th of January. And so that is the first day of the month of Tibet. Okay, so let me look again. Actually, the month of Shavat, sorry. The Kadesh for Tibet was, I believe, the 29th of December, something like that. Um, all right, so I'm going to do just 2 more months to help you understand this, and then we'll move into some of the other aspects of the calendar. All right, so going to February, the moon reaches 0.00% on the 26th of February at noontime. And so on the 27th of February at noon, it is listed as reaching 0.01%. And so it will be in that evening that the moon reaches past this. It will be 0.02%, and meaning that it will become visible as a very thin sliver, a waxing crescent moon. And so again, it is on the 27th of February that we have the first day and the new moon day, the first of Adar, Adar, which is the last month of the Hebrew calendar, as long as there is not a 13th month, which I will explain that here in a short bit. And so on the 27th of February, on the calendar, as you'll see it, it lists New Moon Day, the first of Adar. The month is the 12th month, the year 6003. And this is Rosh Chodesh Adar. And then for February 28th, that's the second of Adar, the same thing, 12, 6003. And then when you go to the very next, because Rosh Chodesh, the February 27th, that is a Monday, the following 7 day Sabbath will also fall on Monday and be aligned to Monday. And so on the 6th of February, that is the 8th of Adar, the first quarter, and it aligns with the first quarter Sabbath moon. On the 13th of February, that is the 15th of Adar, and that is the second, the full moon Sabbath. And then on the 20th of February, that is the third quarter Sabbath moon, the 22nd of Adar, and that is also the vernal equinox, which happens at 6:29 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And then on the 27th of March, you have the 29th of Adar, and that is the fourth Sabbath in the lunar conjunction. And this particular month only has 29 days. And then on the 28th of March, you have the new moon day, which is the first of Nisan, or the month of Abib, and that is the first month and the new year, 6004, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And so if you are looking at your calendar, you'll see how all that lines up. All right, so let me explain the fractions one more time. It is on the 27th of March, that noontime, that the moon reaches 0.00%. And then on the 28th of March, the moon at noontime will reach 0.00%. And by the next day at noon, the moon will reach 0.04%. And so you know that from noon the 28th of March to noon the 29th of March, the moon will increase from 0.01% to 0.04%. And so we know that it is on the 28th that the moon will reach a waxing crescent. All right, hold on. Yes, I'll explain that next. All right, there's a question in the chat room as to how was I determined that the year was 6003 instead of 5777. And so I will go ahead and answer and explain that. And because the Jews actually in Israel, they believe the year to be 5,777. And so I asked specifically an individual named Fred Myers at the World's Last Chance because I noticed that they have their calendar situated on that site. The year is 6003. And so this is the question that I asked him when about their determination for the year count. I sent this. When looking into this information for the updated version of the calendar, I asked Fred Myers because I was asked this same question um, on Facebook, and this is the answer that I gave. I asked Fred Myers at World's Last Chance specifically why they have listed the year as 6003. I personally feel that we are in the year near 6,000, and I'll explain why in just a short bit. But because of the extensive research that they have done on this particular topic, I decided to side with the bulk of that research and to list the year as 6003. However, we do not exactly know where we are in the timeline. I will, however, attach the letter that I sent him where I postulated that we are in fact in the year 6000 possibly. And here's my reasoning for why. But first, the email correspondence that I had with Fred Myers. I do have a question for you if you don't mind. I want to first thank you for all of your hard work that you and your team have done in putting forth the many truths that you do. I have had many questions concerning the calendar answered by the tremendous amount of work that all of you have done in providing the forums and videos that you have. However, I do wonder if you can expound upon why your group has dated the Hebrew year to 6003 when the traditional Jewish number is 5,777. I do thank you again for your time. God bless. And Fred sent me this reply. World's Last Chance is not dogmatic about the precise year displayed by the calendar app. This is simply our best estimation based on the available information. And then he sent me. All right, we'll be right back and I'll explain further. All right, welcome back, everybody. And so I did share a link to the article that Fred shared with me on how World's Last Chance arrived at the biblical year count 6003. And I'm going to read the answer. I'm not going to read the fullness of it, but I am going to read enough that you'll understand and you can see that they have done a lot of investigation in this area of research. And then I'm going to share why I believe that we're actually near the year 6000 uh, this particular year and that we've arrived at the 120th Jubilee. But let me read this first. And so, the article is how did you arrive at the biblical year count as displayed on World's Last Chance? The answer most Bible commentaries have used Ussher's chronology as the standard for determining the age of the earth. Now, mind you, I am not a young earther. All of you that are aware of my work, especially as I published it in the firmament and all of my other books, and the first three chapters on the firmament describing how the earth became without form and void, and also in my new book, The Great Contest War in Heaven, I speak about how in Genesis 1 1 and 1 2, that the earth and the heavens were created perfect, but then something happened where it was without form and void. And when you look up those words in the Strong, it means that the earth became an indistinguishable ruin, uh, and a destroyed wasteland, which in Isaiah 45 and 2nd Esdras, it speaks about how God created the heavens and the earth perfect to be inhabited and not vain. And so something led to it becoming vain. And it's my opinion what led to it becoming vain is the war in heaven, which led to what Second Peter chapter 3 references as world that the world that then was becoming drowned perished, whereby the world that then was becoming drowned perished. And so it's speaking about that particular destruction. It's also referenced in Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 23 through 30, and Ezekiel 26, and also Isaiah 23. And so, anyways, I am not a young earther, but the people at World's Last Chance believe that, there's only 6,000 years to the full history of the earth, which is what it's saying right here. But again, I don't adhere to that, and I've explained in great detail as to why. But I'm going to continue on. Okay. Most biblical commentaries have used Ussher's chronology as the standard for determining the age of the earth. James Ussher, January 4th, 1581 to March 21st, 1656, was the Anglican Archbishop of Armagh. He developed a system of chronology and dating that is still widely used by scholars today. Ussher's chronology placed 1 AD as the supposed year of the birth of Yeshua. However, with the research available today, it is now known that Yahushua was actually born approximately 4 years earlier, making Ussher's chronology off by 4 years in the Common Era. Furthermore, transitioning from BC dates to AD dates require the addition of one extra year because 1 year must be lived through completely in order to be counted as year one. Ussher did not have that 0 year that would move the counting from BC 1 to AD 1. Ussher's chronology calculates to 4004 BC as being the year of creation. There are, I would say, modern creation, like Adam and Eve, um, because the pre Adamic age, even in Genesis 1, it speaks about pre Adamic man, and that was before the Genesis 2:7 creation of modern Adam and Eve, or modern Adam and then later Eve. There are three errors that must be accounted for when using Ussher's chronology: the lack of a 0 year, the age of Terah at Abraham's birth, and the beginning date of the 430 years of bondage before Israel would inherit Canaan. World's Last Chance uses Genesis 11:26 as the source for the correct age of Terah at Abraham's birth. While many have assumed that the children of Israel spent 430 years in Egypt itself, the actual beginning of this time period started when Yahuwah and Abraham entered into a covenant relationship. See Genesis 17. Abraham was circumcised at that time as a sign of the covenant. The timing of the years of bondage beginning then is confirmed by the book of Jasher, which is referred to twice in Scripture. All right, I'm not going to read the rest of it. You can read it for yourself. I have posted the link in the chat room, and I will also include it in the description of this particular video when it is released to the archive. Now, what is interesting to me is that they also count, as I have, that where it mentions in Genesis that God would give man, or the the people of wickedness, the watchers and the giants that were living 120 years of reprieve, that what God was actually referencing was the 120 Jubilees, which is equivalent to 6,000 years. And then when you add the millennial reign, That is the 7,000 years that comprise the Second World Age. And I explain this in great detail also in my War in Heaven book, The Great Contest, where I explain about this. But here's the continuing the next letter that I sent uh, to Fred was to ask him what he thought about. Well, I'll just read it and then you'll see. This is the next letter that I sent to him. I said, "Hey brother, I just wanted to thank you for the quick reply and for taking the time to share this article with me. Likewise, I do believe that we are somewhere near the end of that and that we are the fig tree generation, which will see the prophetic fulfillment of all things. One last thing for consideration. I thought that because the roots of Israel's recreation are connected to the Balfour Declaration of 1917 and their annexing of Jerusalem in 1967 and 68, and also because the Revelation 12 sign of the woman clothed in the sun with the child in her womb and moon beneath her feet with the crown of 12 stars as astronomical alignment plays out on September 23rd of 2017 near the Feast of Trumpets, that perhaps we are in a Jubilee year, and that this would be the final Jubilee of the 120 put forth by Yahuwah in Genesis when speaking to Noah. Your thoughts? Question. And if this is correct, would that not put us on an exact 6,000 year timeline for this particular year? And if that is the case, and looking at the timeline that you have proposed, is there any tweaking which would indicate it as such? Once again, I appreciate you and thank you for your consideration and time. God bless. And so and if you don't understand what I'm speaking about in specific, it was in 1917 that the Balfour Declaration was signed, which gave the Jews the right to return to the Holy Land. And it was supposed to divide Palestine into two different nations, Israel and that of Palestine, one for the Jewish people and one for the Palestinians, which, are also of um, the seed of Abraham that were living in the land. And so this is his reply when, I asked him about this. Oh, and then the other thing with in 1967 and 68, if you make those calculations, 1917, add 50 years, you get to 1967. It was in 67 and 68 that Jerusalem was conquered in full during the Six-Day War, and Israel took over control of both Western and Eastern Jerusalem, and Jerusalem as a city was united for the first time in 2,000 years. And so, in my opinion, those two dates are significant. And why wouldn't they be linked to the Jubilee, especially when you consider that, as I said in the last part of that particular email that I sent him, that it is this year, 2017, that the sign of the woman clothed with the sun, with the moon beneath her feet, a child within her womb, and a crown of 12 stars, which are the 9 star constellation of Leo, and um, the planets Mercury, Venus, and Mars will all be in alignment. And this alignment will happen in our in the skies over Jerusalem on near the Feast of Trumpets, September 23rd of 2017 this year. And so the fact that these three 50-year increments, as far as the dates and the years, have very significant um, are very significant in connection to Israel, that I put forth the postulation that it seems to me that these are the last three Jubilees because these very critical and crucial events seem to indicate so. Now, of course, there's no way for us to determine specifically that this is the case, but you know how God likes to emphasize and to enhance and to show as above, so below, that events that happen on the earth will oftentimes be highlighted within the heavens, that there will be signs in the sun, moon, the earth, and the stars, all related to specific events. And to me, that's what those 3 years, and especially the Revelation 12 sign, are indicating. And so, but again, the reason that I included the year as 6003 on the calendar was because of the extensive amount of um, research that World's Last Chance has done. But again, in my opinion, I believe we are on that 6,000 year timeline as of this year. As far as on the month of Nissan, which is upcoming, that we're right now still in that 5,999 year, but that on the first of Nissan, on Rosh Chodesh Nissan, that will be the beginning of the 6,000 year. All right, so here's his reply to me. We do not concern ourselves with the adjustment of the year, as we know now we are very likely on borrowed time, for Yahuwah is not willing that any should perish. Yahuwah's timeline has absolutely nothing to do with the developments in the Middle East at this time, so we place no greater importance on what happens in the land of Palestine, except for the fact that the whole world is being deceived by Satan's system implemented there as a big part of his end time wonder, as expected in Matthew 24:24. We do understand, however, that with Francis being the last pope and world events moving so rapidly, especially with developments in the USA, and the image of the beast now forming, maturing, we are very close to the climax of prophetic events about to be triggered by the worldwide earthquake and the setting off of the seven trumpets of Revelation. And so, and then I sent him a further message. I appreciate your reply and thank you for the resources. Be blessed in your seeking and teaching. And so that's where I left it at. And so I hope that answers you, Link. And as I said, for those that want to know more about this, I will put all of this information into the description of this video when I release it into the archives on YouTube. And so that's my line of thinking. Piney asks, Zen, is a year by this system 365 days as in our regular Gregorian calendar? And yes, it is. However, this is my line of thinking also, Piney. Um, because Enoch describes the solar year as being 364 days. He describes that the sun moves from the Tropic of Capricorn to the Tropic of Cancer over 30 days through each of these six gates, and that we have four special days, which are the two equinoxes and the two solstices, which give us an equivalent of 364 days. Now, what I have not had yet chance to do, but what I want to do is to count the days in between the vernal equinoxes to see exactly how many days there are. Because in my mind, God would not change the number of days, especially when you read Jubilees chapter 6 and he warns against the altering and the changing of the calendar and the 364-day year, which when we return from break, I will read that warning. And so when you study Jubilee 6, you wonder why it is that God, if he puts out this warning and he is telling Noah to warn his sons to not follow anything but a 364-day year, why it is and how it is that he would all of a sudden change the length of the solar year to 365 point and a quarter days. It doesn't make sense to me. Why would he do that? He wouldn't, especially if he is warning against it. Um, we actually have time, so I'm going to read that particular portion. This is Jubilees chapter 6. Let me find where I want to start. Okay, here. Let me see. I'm just selecting where I want to start reading it. Okay. Okay, I'm going to start from verse 15. It says this. And he gave to Noah and his sons a sign that there should not again be a flood on the earth. He set his bow in the cloud for a sign of the eternal covenant, that there should not again be a flood on the earth to destroy it all the days of the earth. For this reason it is ordained and written on the heavenly tablets that they should celebrate the Feast of Weeks in this month once a year to renew the covenant every year. And this whole festival was celebrated in heaven from the day of creation till the days of Noah, 26 jubilees and 5 weeks of years. And Noah and his sons observed it for 7 jubilees and 1 week of years, till the day of Noah's death. And from the day of Noah's death, his sons did away with it until the days of Abraham, and they ate blood. And Abraham observed it, and Isaac and Jacob and his children observed it up to thy days. And in the days of the children of Israel forgot it until ye celebrated anew on this mountain. So he's talking about the Feast of Weeks, the feast of as far as the first fruits, these 7 weeks where they offered up a different barley crop, and then on the 50th day was the Pentecost, Shavuot. And so that's what he's speaking about. And he's telling you that Noah observed it, Isaac and Abraham, their children, Jacob, all of them honored and celebrated this these feasts. All right, continue. And do thou command thy children of Israel to observe this festival in all their generations for a commandment unto them. One day in the year in this month they shall celebrate the festival. For it is the feast of weeks and the feast of first fruits. This feast is twofold and of a double nature, according to what is written and engraven concerning it. Celebrate it. For I have written in the book of the first law, in that which I have written for thee, that thou shouldst celebrate it in its season, one day in the year. And as I explained to thee, its sacrifices that the children of Israel should remember and should celebrate it throughout their generations in this month, one day in every year. All right, we'll be right back and then I'll finish up. All right, welcome back, everybody. I do want to touch upon the rest of Jubilee 6, as I do believe this is very critical and it's important. And again, it makes me hesitate to believe that Yahuwah would change the year count, and which makes me want to look closely at the as far as how many days um, are in between the vernal equinoxes to see if there are 364 days or 365, which again, it just does not make sense to me that God would change the number, the movements of the sun to so that there would be an additional day in a quarter. Again, just does not make sense. All right, continuing. For I have written in the book of the first law, in that which I have written for thee, that thou shouldst celebrate it in its season, one day in the year. And I explained to thee its sacrifices, that the children of Israel should remember and should celebrate it throughout their generations in this month, one day in every year. And on the new moon of the first month, and on the new moon of the fourth month, and on the new moon of the seventh month, and on the new moon of the 10th month, are the days of remembrance, are the days of the seasons in the four divisions of the year. These are written and ordained as a testimony forever. And Noah ordained them for himself as feasts for the generations forever, so that they have become thereby a memorial unto him. It's my opinion that these, the new moon of the first month, the fourth month, the seventh month, and the 10th month, that they are the divisions for the seasons of the year. That the first month is beginning of spring, the fourth month the beginning of summer, the seventh month the beginning of fall, and the 10th month the beginning of winter. And that's what he's talking about with those particular uh, festivals, because those are what are referenced as the natural holy days. It's the equinoxes and the solstices. All right, continue. And Noah ordained them for himself as feasts for the generations forever, so that they have become thereby a memorial unto him. And on the new moon of the first month, he was bidden to make for himself an ark. And on that day, the earth became dry, and he opened the ark and saw the earth. And on the new moon of the fourth month, the mouths of the depths of the abyss between beneath were closed. On the new moon of the seventh month, all the mouths of the abysses of the earth were open, and the waters began to descend into them. On the new moon of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains were seen, and Noah was glad. And on this account, he ordained them for himself as feasts for a memorial forever, and thus are they ordained. And they placed them on the heavenly tablets. Each had 13 weeks. Now, if you add these together, 13 weeks from one to another, past their memorial, from the first to the second, and from the second to the third, and from the third to the fourth. And on the days, the 13 weeks, that would be 26 plus, 26, that's 52. That equals a year. And all the days of the commandment will be 250 weeks of days, and these will make the entire year complete. Thus it is engraved and ordained on the heavenly tablets. And there is no neglecting this commandment for a single year from year to year. And command thou the children of Israel that they observe the years according to this reckoning, 364 days. And these will constitute a complete year, and they will not disturb its time from its days and from its feasts. For everything will fall out in them according to their testimony, and they will not leave out any day nor disturb any feast. And so he says here that as long as you adhere to and follow the 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 breakdown of the seasons, that there are four seasons, they each contain 13 weeks, and they add up to 52 weeks in a year, and that as long as you adhere to this 364-day solar calendar, that you will always be able to celebrate the feast, and that they will remain undisturbed, and they will always fall according to the day that they are supposed to be celebrated. Now, as I have shown in my book, The Flat Earth as the Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, Enoch describes a 354-day lunar calendar and a 364-day solar calendar. And that the way that God keeps track and does what is referenced as intercalculation, which means that he fixes the calendar so that it fits again with the 364-day solar calendar, is that about every third year he adds 1 month that's called the 13th month. It's Adar number 2. And that whenever the barley is not ripe for what will be the feast of first fruits after Passover and unleavened bread, after the Sabbath of unleavened bread, the feast of first fruits. If the barley is not ripe, the high priest cannot wave the barley in a sheaf offering for the sins of Israel. And the way that they reset the calendar is they add this Adar 2, which I told you that the 12th month of the Hebrew calendar is Adar. And when it is necessary, they will add a 13th month, Adar number 2, which will then connect the 354-day lunar calendar to the 364-day solar calendar. Because again, every year the solar calendar is 10 days longer than the lunar calendar. And so all you have to do is every third year determine whether the barley is going to be ripe um, for the day of first fruits, the feast of first fruits, and the festival of first fruits. And if it's not, then you just add this additional month and it realigns it with the 364-day solar calendar. And so, because God says here, and command the children of Israel that they observe the years according to this reckoning, 364 days, and these will constitute a complete year. And they will not disturb its time from its days and from its feasts, for everything will fall out in them according to their testimony. And they will not leave out any day nor disturb any feast. And if that's, I mean, if that 364-day calendar is absolutely correct, why would God make the sun all of a sudden, uh, a 365-day year, 365 day and a quarter year? Doesn't make sense to me. And I won't believe it until I calculate it and determine it for myself. Because in my mind, we um, probably are still in a 364-day year, and we're just being, led astray as we are with the world cosmology. All right, I'm going to continue reading because the rest of this is important as well. But if they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment, then they will disturb all their seasons, and the years will be dislodged from this order, and they will disturb the seasons, and the years will be dislodged, and they will neglect their ordinances. So he's telling you, if you don't follow my 364-day year calendar, solar calendar, you will then lose the order of the seasons and the years will become dislodged from this order. And so, why would God change the movement of the sun to 365 day and a quarter year? Doesn't make sense. All right, continuing. And all the children of Israel will forget and will not find the path of the years, and will forget the new moons and seasons and Sabbaths, and they will go wrong as to all the order of the years. Is this not what happened when they instituted a Julian Gregorian solar calendar, which has 1 month of 28 days, several months of 31 days, several months of 30 days, and there's no congruency with the days of the months and the lunar phases as observed in the cycle of the moon. And that's where we are now. The world is following a pagan calendar, and because of that, they make no exclusion for the new moon. And because they make no exclusion for the new moon, they're not able to keep up with the seasons or the Sabbaths, as it says in this passage, which is absolutely true. And God told us in the time of Noah that this would happen. So I'm going to read it again. And all the children of Israel will forget and will not find the path of the years, and will forget the new moons and the seasons and the Sabbaths, and they will go wrong as to all the order of the years. Continuing. For I know, and from henceforth will I declare it unto thee, and is not of my own devising, for the book lies written before me. So here Noah is telling you he's reading this from the heavenly tablets, that this is going to happen and that this is prophesied to happen. Now, does this not remind you of Daniel chapter 7, where it says that, the Antichrist or Satan, that he would change the times and the years and the recognitions of the seasons and all that? I don't have the passage right before me, but uh, I'll look it up here in a short bit. Again, for I know, and from henceforth will I declare it unto thee, and it is not my own devising. For the book lies written before me, and on the heavenly tablets the divisions of the days is ordained, lest they forget the feasts of the covenant and walk according to the feasts of the Gentiles after their error and after their ignorance. Now, what are the feasts of the Gentiles? Easter, Christmas, Halloween, Lent, Good Friday. All those are, you know, paganized Christian holidays that have been bastardized. That are, those are idolatrous holidays, not God's holy days. The feasts of the covenant. What is the covenant? Read Leviticus chapter 23, where he ordained and he mandated Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Shavuot, tabernacles, um, trumpets, the Day of Atonement, Yom Teruah, um, Yom Kippur. Those are the feasts of the covenant. All right, continue. For there will be those who will assuredly make observations of the moon, how it disturbs the seasons and comes in from year to year 10 days too soon. So this is what Enoch was talking about also. Again, the lunar calendar is a 354-day calendar. It is 10 days short of the 364-day solar calendar, which is why you have to add that 13th month, Adar 2, every third year or so. All right, continuing, because I know we're quickly running out of time. For this reason, the years will come upon them when they will disturb the order and make an abominable day, the day of testimony. You know what that abominable day is? Well, it depends on who you are. If you are the Jews and you celebrate Sabbath from Friday at sundown to Saturday at sundown, well, then that's your abominable day. If you're the Seventh day Adventist and you celebrate Sabbath on Saturday, that's your abominable day. If you're a mainstream Christian and you celebrate Sabbath on Sunday, that's your abominable day. Because the set every 7 day Sabbath, according to the Gregorian calendar, that is wrong. You cannot determine Sabbath according to a continuous cycle of every 7 days. Sabbath is aligned to and determined by the new moon day as the first day of the lunar month. And then you have the following 4 7-day weeks, which there was a question here, and I guess I should answer it as well. The question is this from Isaac Trevino. He asked, I like all your great research, Dan. Thank you. I do have a question after the last day of the lunar month, which is usually a Sabbath. How does it work when the next lunar month starts with a new moon Sabbath? Does that mean we're celebrating 2 Sabbath days in a row from that last day of the lunar month to the next? All right. And this is why I changed it in this calendar. In last year's calendar, I had the new moon as considered being the first day and also the first Sabbath of the lunar month. But the new moon day, even though some people and some calendar systems do consider it as Sabbath, it is slightly different from Sabbath. It's not as rigid, um, and it is also given slightly more honor. The new moon days are called a holy convocation, but they are slightly different from Sabbath. And so in this calendar, I have separated it in the new version in this year's calendar. I have separated new moon day at Kadesh and have not counted it as the first Sabbath of the lunar month. And so, but when, and for those that do, yes, there would be 5 Sabbaths in the month. And yes, they are often side by side, meaning that um, the lunar conjunctive, the fourth, well, it would be the fifth Sabbath, and the new moon Sabbath can often be side by side, back to back. Or there will be the translation day in between them. But again, I changed that determination in this calendar so that it wouldn't cause confusion in that way. And so now, when you look at the calendar, you'll see that as I have laid it out, and I'll explain this from the month of February, that it was on January 28th that was the first day in the new moon of Shavat, Rosh Chodesh Shavat, and that on the 8th of Shavat, which is the fourth Saturday, February 4th, that is the first quarter Sabbath moon. On the 11th of February, which is all the Sabbaths in February fall on Saturday. On the 11th of February, that is the 15th of Shabbat, which is the full moon Sabbath. And when I say Shavat, the month is SH apostrophe VAT. Shavat. That's the Hebrew month. That's the 11th month. On the 18th of February, that will be the 22nd of Shavat. And that will link up with the third quarter moon. On the 25th of February, that is the 29th of Shavat, and that is the fourth quarter, the lunar conjunctive Sabbath. And then you have the 30th of Shavat on the 26th of February. And then on the 27th of February, you have Rosh Chodesh Adar, the new moon and first of Adar, which is the beginning of the 12th month of the year 6003. Okay? All right, so let me go back to reading this Jubilees. I need to finish that. All right. So, verse 37, for this reason the years will come upon them when they will disturb the order and make an abominable day the day of testimony, and an unclean day a feast day. And they will confound all the days, the holy with the unclean, and the unclean day with the holy. For they will go wrong as to the months, the Sabbaths, the feasts, and the jubilees. And that all happened when uh, Hillel in the 4th century AD, he changed the determination of Sabbath from being linked to the new moon to being um, one in every 7 day. And he made Sunday or Saturday, it was. He made Saturday the day of testimony, the abominable day, as it is referenced in this particular passage, in this particular scripture. All right, let me read the final verse here from Jubilees. It says, for this reason I command and testify to thee, that thou mayest testify to them, for after thy death thy children will disturb them, so that they will not make the year 364 days only. And for this reason they will go wrong as to the new moons and the seasons and the Sabbaths and the festivals, and they will eat all kinds of blood with all kinds of flesh. What is he talking about here? Noah is telling you that in that day, this is during the, you know, Julian, Gregorian, Constantinian, when they changed the calendar, when they divorced the months and Kadesh and the determination of Sabbath from the phases of the moon. That's when everything got confused, everything got lost. Now, I have some explanation of this. I'm going to share it with you. It says this: what few Jews and even less Sabbatarians know is during the 4th century AD, persecution of all who used the original Hebrew lunar-based calendar for worship was so intense that in the end, the Jews gave up their calendar handed down from the text of the creation through to Moses, and instead adopted a calendar adjusted for worship based on the solar centered Julian calendar. If asked, the Jewish leadership is very open that the original calendar was set aside under the intense Roman persecution of all who used the Hebrew calendar in the 4th century AD. All right, we'll be right back and we'll finish this up. All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm going to share again just a couple of these are quotes from my book, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, and it will help you to understand when the changes were made as far as the Julian calendar, which was instituted in the 1st century. But the Jewish people fought against it for a very long time until the 4th century of AD, when Hillel the second uh, basically gave up. And so I'll read that. All right, it's continuing. If asked, the Jewish leadership is very open that their original calendar was set aside under the intense Roman persecution of all who used the Hebrew calendar in the 4th century AD. Quote, under the reign of Constantinius, 337 to 362 BC, the persecution of the Jews reached such a height that the computation of the calendar was forbidden under pain of severe punishment. And so you can see that it was, during this time, Constantinius, that the calendar was changed by Hillel. But let me continue reading. The new moon is still, and the Sabbath originally was dependent upon the lunar cycle. Originally, the new moon was celebrated in the same way as the Sabbath. Gradually, it became less important while the Sabbath became more and more a day of religion and humanity, of religious meditation and instruction, of peace and delight of the soul. This is found in the Universal Jewish Encyclopedia, page 410, under the heading Holidays. A few more quotes for you. With the development of the importance of the Sabbath as a day of consecration and the emphasis laid upon the significant number 7, the week became more and more divorced from its lunar connection. This is also from the Universal Jewish Encyclopedia, um, under the title Week on page 482. All right, a few more. It is easy to see how such a tradition could be useful to justify changing the calendar due to the extreme persecution facing all who worship by the lunar based Hebrew calendar. Using his authority as president of the Sanhedrin, it is assumed that Hillel II tied the annual feast to the spring equinox. Next, he adjusted the weekly seventh day Sabbath to the Julian seventh day Saturday. This freed the Jews from the condemnation of the law since they no longer knew when the true Sabbath occurred. Thus, they justified their use of the pagan calendar. And so, this is a passage from my book. Here, it says, true Sabbath is aligned to Kadesh and can only be determined by its occurrence. But because the months of the Gregorian solar based calendar have relinquished ties to the natural cycle of the moon's quarterly phases, Sabbath can now fall on any of the days of the week: Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. And since most of the people alive today follow the Gregorian solar calendar, do not pay attention to the phases of the moon, and do not understand how God's calendar divides the lunar months of the year, they do not, as a consequence, know when to celebrate Sabbath, since they never actually know when it occurs. All right. And that's why I made this new calendar, which I'll read that to you. To better enable you as a reader capacity to grasp what I've been alluding to over the last few paragraphs, one can analyze the idiosyncrasies of this system to this calendar that I created. Study of it should enable one to gain greater insight into how the system works surrounding Kadesh, and also give you a visual representation to better enable one to perceive the simplicity of God's calendar design. All right, now I'm going to read just a few more things about how this calendar was switched, and then we'll finish up with last commentary. All of this is found in my book, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, because it's in the first 10 chapters that I explain God's calendar system as it is found in the Book of Enoch. All right. And it was in decrypting the Book of Enoch that I was really led to 2 years ago, understanding of this myself. All right, continuing. For those who use the scriptural Hebrew calendar calculation, it is very simple. The weekdays, Sabbaths, the new moon Sabbath of each lunar month, they always fall on the exact same dates of each Hebrew month. This explains why, whenever the date of a seventh day Sabbath is given in the Hebrew scripture, it always falls on the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, or the 29th of the Hebrew month. The days of the week do not float through the monthly dates as they do now on the modern Gregorian calendar. After Hillel II fixed the calendar to fit into a Julian framework and moved the observance of the seventh day Sabbath from the lunar week to the continuously cycling Julian week, difficulties arose. The new moon would cycle through the Julian days of the week, which caused the annual feast to fall on the wrong times of the month. As a result, rules of postponement were established. The Hebrew calendar became necessary with the inefficient and ever changing Julian solar calendar. Those who desire to worship on the true seventh day Sabbath should not look to modern calendation efforts. All who worship on Saturday because the Jews keep Saturday are not following the scriptural Hebrew Sabbath, but the fox Sabbath that Hillel II's corruption of the original calendation fashioned. This corruption of the correct day thus channeled the whole of the Jewish people into breaking of one of the Hebrew scriptures most important decrees and caused them to lose track of the new moon Sabbath of each month. That's from my friend Christopher Tyerman and Brad Varnholt. They're co-authored the book The Destruction of Sabbath, which we will be publishing in print because it's not available in print, but they have given us permission to publish it through Sacred Word Publishing. And so at some point, when we get a chance to format it, we will make it available in print form for those of you that, like myself, like to read books in show that the way that the Hebrew calendar works. I guess I should read that to you. I'll read this really quick. This is just to explain how every lunar month is set up. You have the new moon day, which is the first day of the lunar month. This is every lunar month is set up in this format. New moon day, first day excluded from the following 4 7-day counts. So new moon day is the first day of the lunar month. Then you have 6 work days. Those dates are from the 2nd to the 7th. And then you have a Sabbath on the 8th day. Then you have 6 more working days, the 9th through the 14th. And then you have Sabbath on the 15th, the full moon Sabbath. Then you have 6 more working days, and from the 16th through the 21st. And then you have the third quarter Sabbath on the 22nd of the lunar month. Then you have 6 more working days from the 23rd through the 28th. And then you have the lunar conjunctive Sabbath on the 29th of the lunar month. And then, whenever necessary, you have the translation day, which is on the 30th, whenever needed. All right, so this is how, again, how it all breaks down. The 30th of the month, like the first of the month, was not part of the weekly cycle, simply a placeholder to await the adjustment of the lunar cycle. However, it was counted and did have a date, as an account must be made of all time. The original Hebrew scriptural lunar calendar has periodically added a month instead of just a leap day every year. As this extra time accrues every 2 to 3 years, a 13th month is required to be added to adjust the Hebrew calendar back to the seasons. The instructions are for determining whether an additional month was needed is very simple. If the barley crop is ripe enough to harvest in the 11th month, then the 12th month was the end of the year. If the crops were not ready in the 12th month, then a 13th month was added as a leap month in that year. This adjusted the lunar calendar back in with the solar year. Many seem to have trouble with the idea that the system could be that simple, but that is how it is. And so I hope that this show explained to you, helped you to better understand, and I did post a link to where you can find the calendar. All you have to do, for those that are listening or that will listen to the archives, I will post a link in the description box. But if for some reason you can't find it, all you have to do is go to lulu.com, Lulu.com. You can look for Sacred Word Publishing, the ancient Hebrew Enochian lunar calendar for 2017. It will be published under my name, Zen Garcia. And for this month, this calendar is discounted 20%. And so for the month of February, this calendar will be available at this discounted price, which is near cost. And then after that, we'll raise it back to its normal rate. So I do encourage you to get it right now while you can at this discounted rate. And just to explain a little bit more about the calendar, it's beautiful. All the images were done by my daughter-in-law's father, Sangyo Yu, Sangho Yu, and he's Korean and he lives in California. Takes incredible photographs, beautiful images. And on each one of the months, I have one of his beautiful images from the different national and state parks there in California, the different places that he's traveled. And I also have scriptures included on the images which are connected to or linked in some way to either the calendar system or to the flat earth cosmology or to the cycles of the sun, the moon, the stars, to the unfolding of the way that the heavenly luminaries are utilized to determine uh, the signs, the seasons, the days, the months, the years. All of that is included into the calendar. And as I said, each one in following this calendar, it will teach you and you'll become aware of how the Hebrew months link up to the Gregorian monthly equivalent. And you'll soon recognize and be able to tie together, for instance, January, the month of Tibet with January, the month of Adar with February, the month of Shavat, I'm sorry, the month of Shavat with February, the month of Adar with March, which is again the 12th month in the Hebrew calendar. Because unlike the Gregorian calendar, which begins with January in the middle of winter, God's calendar is linear. It progresses from spring to summer to fall to winter as the year progresses. We shouldn't follow a calendar which starts in the middle of winter. That's ridiculous and it's completely pagan. It's idolatrous. And so, in following this calendar that I've created and understanding it in a deeper and more profound way, you will become connected with how God has established and how the names of the different Hebrew months link together with the calendar system that God gave to us, and that He gave this to Adam in the book of the signs. It was one of the 5 books of creation that were given to Adam when he was cast out of paradise. And it was in studying the book of the signs that Adam knew about and understood the clockwork of the heavens. And he passed this knowledge um, on to his children, Seth, and especially to Enoch. It mentions this in a book called The Secret Book of Moses, the Assater, which we're going to publish that as well. As soon as I get time, I'm going to finish up the books I'm working on, and then we're going to start publishing all these other books for y'all. But, anyways, in my Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, I quote from the Secret Book of Moses about how Adam gave over this knowledge to Enoch, how Enoch passed it on to Noah, and then Noah passed it on to his son Shem, who passed it on to Abraham, and then Abraham passed it on to Isaac, and Isaac passed it on to Jacob. And then, according to the book of Jubilees, it was the sons of Jacob that lost their way, and then the calendar system got corrupted. And so from that time, it was lost until it was restored to Moses. And during the Exodus, and I show and affirm this when you listen to the two shows that I did with John and David Carrico over there on Now You See TV, you learn and you understand that it was during the Exodus that the Enochian calendar system was restored to the Israelites. And that um, it is only by understanding how the ancient Hebrew calendar system is set up and works that you can really understand the story of Exodus, the story of the deliverance of the quail, the hidden manna, all of those things. And also um, Yeshua's death, crucifixion, um, his resurrection, because all of those things are also tied and connected to the Levitical feast days. He was the Passover lamb, the lamb without spot or blemish, which was crucified, killed, in order to give us a forgiveness of sins. He was entombed on, you know, before the Sabbath of unleavened bread, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, in the early mornings before dawn. And how I explained that Sabbath is celebrated from dawn to dusk. All of these things are also affirmed and shared in the shows that David Carrico and I and John Pounders and I did on the ancient Enochian Hebrew calendar. And so I will post this up as a follow up for those shows to help you to understand better what we are talking about in those two particular shows. All right, Link asks, so is it still the new month and the first Sabbath of the new month on that first sliver of the moon sighting? Yes, it is, Link. This is the other thing that I've recently changed about the calendar as I had it set up. In my Flat Earth book, I show that, and I had believed that it was a 7% waxing crescent moon that was determined and counted as Kadesh. But I have since um, remodified my understanding and adjusted it so that the first sliver of the moon, when it begins to renew itself, when it begins to restore its light, I count this as Kadesh. And the reason I do so is because when you count the first sighting, the first sliver of the moon as Kadesh, then the following four sabbatical weeks actually line up with the first quarter, the full moon, the third quarter, and the lunar conjunctive moon. Almost exactly precise. So that, it would make sense to me that if God was giving us a calendar which was observable, that he would want the Sabbaths to fall on the exact quarterly phases as they happen according to the cycles of the moon. And so making that adjustment align and readjust the alignment of Kadesh with those quarterly phases so that when you are looking and using the moon as uh, your as your observable sign for adhering to the calendar, well then it is the first quarter moon, which is lined up to the first Sabbath, the full moon, which is lined up to the second Sabbath, and so on and so forth. God bless all. Good night.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Who are we? Where do we come from? Are you curious about the origins of the human race? Join me, Gavin McCall, and a variety of guests on Ancient Humans, where we decipher world events, explore scientific theories,